don't know whether to thank you or curse you for that. That was one hell of an introduction. I don't think I've ever had such an applauding, crediting kind of intro like that, because I haven't ever deserved it, really. But I'm very grateful nonetheless. And you've touched on a few talking points that I possibly will get to. I apologize if I don't. I know I've been waxing lyrical to a number of you in the evenings and afternoons and nights and early mornings over the last couple of days about some of this stuff. So whether it is reiterated or repeated today or not is another matter. I say that particularly because I don't know how many pages I have here. I have a bunch of pages, but I can't and I haven't been able to this year write an actual speech. It's not who I am, and it's not how I operate. I kind of have to be more engaging, be more kind of spontaneous, for better, for worse. I know there are examples of for worse as much as there are examples of for better, and I'm not asking you to highlight them, but you know, so I'll adhere a little bit. I'll be looking down at talking points which I hope to speak to, which I feel are important to speak to, but at the same time, yeah, I might go on tangents, but that's just something that you'll have to bear with me on. I do have a few disclaimers, which are possibly important to flag, because I'm an emotional guy. Ultimately, at heart, I'm a counselling psychologist. We tend to be a little bit emotional, you know, or in tune with them, and at a particular level anyway. And but I'm also just emotional because I am who I am. And this is a daunting. This is a daunting speech. I've had to give a best man speech before, and that's nerve-wracking. This is way above and beyond that. I think there's something about talking to peers that kind of adds some, you know, weight or gravity to the tension that you might easily feel at a personal level, the expectation of the audience. Yeah, I've never been overly comfortable at least, talking to peers. So where I have wobbles, I simply ask for flexibility, sympathy, but not too much of it either. It's been a grueling year. Those on council will know what I'm referring to, and it's not anything in particular. It's just been a particularly intensive, labour-intensive year for those on council and sitting on the board and in officer roles to have had to absorb for a variety of different reasons. I don't think there's ever been a time where we've had 3 resignations from council for different reasons, but at least 2 of them, I think, cited the work burden and the inability to respond as altruistic and highly skilled and capable volunteers. So it has taken its toll in myriad ways, and there's been a proliferation, I think, of council meetings or council-only meetings. So, you know, the regular schedule is 10 in a year or thereabouts. And I think we've probably been closer to 20 this year than 10, and there's been a proliferation of and need for working groups and subcommittees, which has been inspiring and rewarding for various reasons, but also taxing. So if I'm a little burnt out or emotional, you know, as a consequence of that, that's another factor. Moving a little closer to the bone, I've had to bury an uncle in the last month, and I knew that would happen, which was a privilege, having to deliver a eulogy for someone so important and influential. And in a way, it helped dispense with, or, you know, allow me to put in perspective the nerves of talking to you lot, because it doesn't, you know, it pales by comparison in terms of importance, you know, as important as I feel this is, but it's still strongly felt. And he would have been the person to ultimately, unbeknownst or known to himself, teach me a few things. I'll cite a couple. One is important, one is possibly lighter. The ad-libbing. Just be yourself, don't be apologetic for it. Some will ask you to apologize for it, but maybe sometimes you need to, sometimes you don't. But just speak from the heart, be true to yourself. And yeah, just be real. So that's partly why I'm not reading a page script, as it were. Secondly, I used to get hiccups as a kid. There's someone, maybe they're not in the room, they might be in the room, who at 2 o'clock in the morning 2 nights ago got hiccups, and I cured it instantly. And the cure was what I learned from my uncle, Gerard, whose name I took for my confirmation, with no religious, meaning attached, just a personal bond. And it's to produce a £20 note or euro note. And if they're to hiccup again, they won't. And you have to have a good, reliable, valid false hiccup detector, because they'll try. But it works with my kids, and it worked with someone here at 2 o'clock in the morning in the residence bar who went to Columbia, also an Ivy League college, if I recall correctly. And thirdly, the caveat, third and final caveat, is my brother's in the room, who I told him not to come to this. I told him to come to the dinner because I knew he'd throw me off, as he has. And he will be someone and something I'll speak to hopefully in a few moments' time in terms of, I guess, what PSI means, but also how PSI sits with me and our family history. And he's a sign language user and had particular needs at a young age, but I'll return to that in a few moments. This is an honor and a privilege. It genuinely is. I think I used the phrase heavy crown, but I'm uncomfortable with the word crown. But it is, and I think it's something that, yes, I might personally be guilty of taking a little too seriously at times, but only because I care, and it's also because of what I've maybe learned from those around me, those who've gone before me, particularly in recent years because of my involvement and exposure to that. But as one learns more, you do learn and hear about people who've, taken the baton on in times gone by, maybe, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I've read Mitchell Fleming's paper from 2014 in The Irish Psychologist, shout out to Suzanne, and also James McLuhan's article in 2014. I don't know what was happening around that time, but there was a particular impetus for people to talk about the history of formation of PSI and everything that went with that. And it's well worth reading and enlightening. So in recent times, there has been Trojan work done, and I'm invariably going to be guilty of omitting some names or a person, and I don't mean to or intend to. I'm happy to correct the record at any time. But if I just can flag perhaps the recent sequence of psychologists who have managed to, I don't know, delude me or somehow convince me or fool me into buying into the perception that they've managed it effortlessly with grace, with eloquence, but also skill and integrity, particularly Jan Kyo, who wanted to prove it's possible with a young family. I'm here to prove it's not. Don't believe what she said. She managed somehow, but she's special. Megan Gaffney too. I don't know. There's an aura about Megan that I still, all these years later, after knowing her and meeting her for the first time, I'm still trying to describe and capture. But it's a graceful, effortlessly, seemingly effortless ability to steer a ship and steward a society through challenging times. So I do very much take note of that. Vincent McDarby, I think, is someone who replicates that in his own way, even though he'll hate me mentioning his name. And to be fair, Mark Smith, he's not someone I like, really. And my mouth, I'm getting, a little bit of regurgitation here. I do like him. I pretend not to, but I don't think I've seen anyone really individually do so much to address the inequity that was within our profession at different levels, particularly at the postgraduate training level. And as I have this strange internalized, I don't really anymore, but I still kind of have the residual kind of internalized inferiority kind of vibes that accompany counselling psychology at times. And I'd be curious to know if my educational psychology colleagues feel similarly. Maybe not all of them, maybe some of them, I don't know. But Mark, as a clinical psychologist and a Garda Reserve and I don't know how he does all of what he does, to be honest, but he did advance the equity issue that PSI very much had put forward as a position, and it's very rewarding to see that wash through the system, and for counselling and educational psychologists now to be on a funded footing, and how much that seems to be mitigating against or negating or neutralising any risk of disproportionate or amplified inferiority. So I do thank him for that. Okay. Why did all of you guys set some precedent to talk about personal stuff, right? I've attended, not as many as I probably should have, but I've attended some of these over the years, and they've been pretty plain. They've been pretty safe, non-eventful. But in recent years, the bar has certainly been raised, and there's a standard and an expectation to maybe share, and I am a sharer, the personal attachments to or connections with PSI and or one's journey. So for me, I might start with the name Karina Garvey. Some of you will know of that name. You'll know exactly who she is. Some of you won't. I've grown up with that name. I've not necessarily known who she was, but I've had a sense of that. And she has been, and still remains, unbeknownst to her, an incredibly influential, positive force in our family, in our family history. And I think that's amazing. And yet she doesn't realize it, probably. And I think that might speak to many of us, that we do work that means a huge amount, but we might not bear witness to just how significant an effect or impact we might have on people. So how do I know of the name Karina Garvey? And I've only genuinely recently learned in the last year or two who she is, who she was, and her affiliations with PSI and its formation. So getting back to my brother, who is clearly, using AI to hear what I'm saying. I was born in '79. Don't know how I wasn't called John Paul or Mary Carol, which is the actual name of the Pope. Carol Mary, sorry. But into a family, a loving, supportive family, lower middle class. I hear people saying they're middle class, and I'm looking at them going, you are way more affluent and wealthy than I am or ever will be. But lower middle class, humble beginnings, two hardworking parents who were both teachers, but probably had to enter the teaching profession for practical reasons, were denied really their actual life aspirations or ambitions, ultimately in sacrificing that in name of the family and provision for the family for various reasons. And I guess their world changed pretty much instantly, not because I was born. Sounds a little messianic. That's not what I mean. But I was the second of two. So my brother was 2.5, 3 years older than me. And about 6 months into my life, the family world changed. And for reasons that are still not clear, I'm not sure they are necessarily explainable, but he acquired a sort of rare, strange, neurological form of childhood epilepsy now that I've looked into it, and it wasn't always described as that, but it resulted in the dismantlement, damage to destruction of his language processing circuitry in the left temporal lobe, and I guess everything that follows downstream from that in terms of your ability and or impairment when it comes to comprehension, intelligence. But intuitively, having grown up with him, I know he was the smarter one. pretty safe to say. And also, ironically, the more social one. And he's a good dude. But age 2, turning 3, and an Irish health system to navigate in the 1980s, it was horrific. Not that I felt that, maybe indirectly a little bit, but I was oblivious, thankfully, and insulated from it. And I've benefited from it, I think, in some kind of alchemy-like way. But there was a need to diagnose, manage, treatment plan, educate, and map out, and that just simply wasn't the way things happened. And I think we were emerging from an era of institutionalization. So there were still residual recommendations floating around that was the solution. Institutionalize, disappear, start again, which is incredulous and unfathomable, I think, at least the way my value system works. And other misdiagnoses of childhood schizophrenia and/or attention being turned to my parents and their activities, as a couple, whether in the bedroom or outside of it, and mum blaming and this and that, which I think still kind of permeates a little bit, not as much, thankfully, but to some extent it does. All the while forgetting the primary issue, which is what's happening, and let's put the child first, and let's help as much as we can in the best possible way. That's what Karina Garvey did. There's a whole other suite of names, which I won't name because I've been advised by legals not to do so, who were far less helpful and arguably far more damaging. I think Karina Garvey was one of a number, part of a community of growing psychological practitioners of varying experience and training, looking to establish psychology as a profession at the time. A founding member of PSI in the Mater Hospital. So there's additional resonance to that, having spent 18 years in there with Oren, as he very kindly shed you guys in on. But she was incredibly helpful, and her name has never been mentioned in anything other than glowing terms. She wasn't the person to solve the problem, per se, but she certainly was the person to steer and assist and help and support in ways that she, as I said already, probably doesn't even realize. I've never spoken to her, I've never met her, I hope I will at some point, but she's unaware of my intention to talk about her here today. So that led to a journey for our family and remortgaging of any, surplus privilege we might have had to, really overextend, double mortgage the house, everything required ultimately to diagnose my brother and what needed to be done about it in order for him to have the best possible life, which led to trips to America. Ireland just wasn't resourced enough and skilled enough to meet those needs and demands. And we landed eventually in a place in New York Hospital, I think it's Einstein Hospital or something of that variation. And Isabel Rappin was the neurologist, and I think she was one of the leading figures in neurology in the area of child needs and child neurodivergence and child autism before that became a thing. But she rightly, and to this day, accurately diagnosed my brother with a condition called Landau-Kleffner syndrome, which means he hears everything. He just doesn't understand language, spoken language, but he signs, and he was ultimately taught to read by visual associations and pairings, and leveraging the visual sense by another close friend, possibly my best friend, 80-year-old. I was about to say nurse, but she's not a nurse; she's a nun, and you wouldn't know it though. And Sister Patricia, yeah. Who is a part of our family. And so sign language was the way forward. And it opened up incredible doors. So partly for that reason, I know my brother Donny has found his place or home in many communities, but the deaf community is one of them, even though he's not deaf. And it's the ultimate educational model that he was slotted into, and he's thrived ever since, and is a working professional and will refuse to lay down his cards and resign in any way, shape, or form, which is admirable and inspiring, but also possible because of Trina Garvey and PSI's core values and Sis Patricia, and I guess my family ecosystem as well, as much as I think they're crazy. So I've lost, I'm looking at the page, but I don't even know what I'm looking at. I think that has shaped my personal journey, and Oren spoke to, yes, correctly, how much I follow him around. Educated in America at an undergraduate level, social anxiety became a bit of a mutual thing. I don't know where he is, there he is. The Mater Hospital, 18 years you left for creative reasons or differences. I left after 18 years for creative difference reasons, to put it that way. And but also because of an opportunity to, and also I'm learning how to appreciate waistcoats. I am. I don't know anyone better who does it better, but I'm going to compete with you. So it prompted, though, a decision, and an opportunity arose in Tala University Hospital, and can I just credit that before it goes out of my head? I've joined an amazingly wonderful team. It's a dream team, at least for me. I don't know if they feel similarly, but it is full of, it's a small enough team, modest enough sized team. It can grow further. I think at its core is its manager, who's brought a new energy and vision for the team and the department and the service. And she's also full of humanity, who's helped me at moments this year when I've needed that. But wouldn't necessarily have expected it from a manager. That's not been my experience. So I just want to credit Valerie to me for that. Many of you will know her already. My wonderful colleagues too, but also the opportunity to work in neurology as an outlier. So my email signature will say I'm Principal Specialist Counselling and Neuropsychologist. I think that's partly right. As it stands, I'm not eligible for full membership of the Division of Neuropsychology. That is not a POP at the division, because I think that division has really stood out in the last couple of years for what it's doing to be more inclusive, facilitative, and aligned with PSI values, which is about supporting, enabling, helping, whilst also maintaining appropriate standards. And I think just neurology is a little bit of a home for me, for obviously the personal reasons I've tried to articulate already, but also because of the unmet needs I see within that service, which are many, and I don't think I'm necessarily best at meeting all of them, but some of them I think I am fantastic. Like, if you have a podium, why not just brag, you know? I think it's time for me to start wrapping up, isn't it? And I'm probably not prepared for that yet. There are things I do want to mention, though, which I'll try to get organised around. I've never seen PSI and its ecosystem. I think I was talking to the chair of the coaching division briefly just before starting, which was lovely to make that connection, and indeed others. President of BPS, Geraldine O'Hare, I think Northern Ireland BPS, and I think earlier in the week, Lauren Dean, I hope I have that last Laura Dean, who's incoming president of the BPS National Society, and just noticing differences between our own sort of setup and theirs. And we are in a time of multiple forces acting against or with us, some of which I'll hope to speak to, but I don't want to pass over the incredible enthusiasm and activity and energy that I am not just saying for the sake of saying, because that's kind of what's expected within a speech if someone was writing the speech for you. I don't have this written down myself, but and some SIGs and DIVs kind of stand out. I'm not neglecting to mention SIGs or DIVs that I think are not doing well enough or enough at all. But we'd be here all day, I think, if I went through the list. Division of Neuropsychology, I think, just because of my personal affiliation, my personal kind of journey, my personal identity, I think has really stood up, particularly at the adult level in terms of its specialist competencies framework and launching that. And I think that deserves, to be lauded. And it's been a multi-personnel kind of effort spanning many years. I think it's lovely to see climate change as a SIG on the map, on the agenda, part of the discussion. It's one of our strategic priorities, I think, as it ought to be. Something that shouldn't be paid lip service to, and I think, Oren, you deserve a huge amount of credit for bringing that into its existence and current sort of state of development and progression. The student affairs group and the early careers graduates group, these are unbelievable. You genuinely are. I don't think there's another SIG division that can rival you guys for energy and enthusiasm, and that's hugely encouraging and uplifting, and I think you deserve credit for that. And as much as we loved having Bex on council of late, I know she's departing, and her replacement would be warmly welcomed, because it's been a fantastic asset to wider council and other related discussions. I think I do need to just mention briefly, and they'll hate me for doing it, but fellow council members, there's now 17 of us. I won't name and list everybody off, but particularly those on the governance team: John Francis, leader, honorary secretary for the last year; Cal McDonough, I don't think you realise how special you are, our honorary treasurer; Katerina Timulakova, membership secretary. Just egoless work, but so much of it. It is noticed. Dean MacDonald, a bromance. I have to admit, is that a conflict of interest? There's a conflict of interest, I know. I'll just keep it minimal. But again, efforts are valued, noticed, and highly appreciated. Sarah Cassidy, incoming, and it's okay, I did clear it with you before, just because I think it's important to, name these things and have it out in the open. Our first official autistic president, which is wonderful. And you've been a mentor. Yeah. And you've been a mentor to me in my effort to identify, diagnose, and inform the formulation and management of patients attending the neurology service who are likely to be autistic but just not identified as such. So I'm very grateful to you for that. Sharon Lambert. I know. Don't look at me like that. What a powerhouse. Unbelievable. And not just at a professional level, inside and outside of PSI, but also at a personal level. I've valued that a lot. Albert Osthoff. I'm not sure if he's here, but he deserves a mention. He has done an incredible amount of work of late to help PSI, the Society, Council, other subcommittees manage and plot forward what happens next during times that have been quite challenging. And he's a great asset to the board. I think Louise Higgins is probably popping into my head just lastly, because I can't not mention her, because she is the current manifestation in my brain, I hope this doesn't come across as inappropriate, but of Karina Garvey. I know you are, and I think you're incredible, and we hope to have you back on council in the new year. Your consent and willingness, which I would understand might not be a given, but notwithstanding that, we'd welcome you back into the fold. Okay, let me move into PSI members more broadly, who've contributed to PSI in a variety of ways over the years. My time's up, but it's not. Who I just think need to be mentioned. They deserve a mention. Suzanne Gearan. I don't think... the Irish psychologist wouldn't exist. She always says, oh, she's part of a team, she's not. She carries it. She might be part of a team, but she carries it. I'd be loath to think of what things would be like if she were to step down from that, and I would also understand why she would want to. But she deserves a huge amount of credit. She is synonymous with PSI and its values. Margaret McGinley, someone who I've never met. And I don't know where the membership and qualifications and chartership committee would be, or where membership would be without her and her efforts, relentless efforts, all done voluntarily. I know James McLoone is one of the names I see on the page here because he's one of the founding members. Again, I don't know James at all. Seamus, I think, is another name he goes by. But he stands out when you look back through the history of PSI. I'm saying her name again, Valerie Toomey, just because she deserves it, at a personal level, but also she's synonymous with PSI and her husband Kevin, and conference wouldn't be conference without her being there. Mitchell Fleming is another name I cannot omit. Two-time president, only two-time president. I think there's people coming for you. I am not one of them. I can assure you of that. But your contributions are especially with no time left to mention. I wouldn't be able to. We'd need a whole afternoon workshop to kind of unpack it. But I think it's universally felt that your value to PSI is just unrivalable. Des Swan is another name that stands out in terms of establishment of educational psychology. I had the privilege of meeting Julian Leslie, whose name I've known for years. I think he might be in the room. I'd never known what he looked like until yesterday when I doorstopped him. Apologies for that. A bit abrupt. I was sleep deprived, unfed, and tipsy. Undergraduate accreditation wouldn't happen really without his unbelievable contributions and efforts in that regard. Rita Honan, I just have to mention her. She's not here, but she was the director of the counselling psychology course at the time I was doing it. I know that's since been taken over by Lazzo Timilak, and it's amazing to see how much it has evolved through their stewardship. When I used to believe it was an inferior, lesser than course, I genuinely now believe it's the best postgraduate training in the country. Not just because I'm a lecturer on the course, but anyway, partly, but maybe I drag it down a little bit. No, it is. It's lovely to see. It genuinely, and it's taken me a long time to see that, so credit where credit is due. And finally, well, not finally, two names left. Rosaline McIlvenny, I think, is someone who flies below the radar, but is an incredible, inspiring, amazing individual. And I know there are many more like her and others, but time is against me. Niall Muldoon gets an honourable mention too. I know. But you'll see why in a few minutes when I finally wrap this up. PSI is not PSI without its staff. And, I think we are guilty at times of taking them for granted in times gone by. I think we need to value them more, and I think that's where Albert and others have stepped up in terms of, thinking of how that can be done through various means and strategies and, pay terms, conditions, health insurance policies. What's going to help retain staff and help people be invested in and committed to PSI. And I guess the name that comes to mind most immediately is Lisa Stafford, who's looking at me. If there's a red dot that appears on my head or torso, it's Lisa somewhere. But also like Susan Fox, who's office manager, Marion Plenty, membership manager, Karen Byrne, who's council secretariat, and we are very much missing her at the moment due to sick leave, and the valuable contributions that she provides to us. Claire Hackett, division liaison and committee coordinator. Kennedy Fiorella, we're becoming friends. Lucy Brennan, I want to be friends with all of them, to be honest, but Lucy Brennan, media and content coordinator. Mariana Yefimova, membership coordinator. Yadja Penisic, events coordinator, and our most recent addition to staff, Dayton O'Regan, who's kind of a multitasking administrator supporting everybody and ourselves. And I think it's important too, historically, just to flag Ange Evans. Mitchell will know who I'm talking about. And that was a name that really stood out when I read your paper, and the importance of that contribution by Anne. Okay, I do probably need to swiftly move through some, I thought, important stuff, but maybe it's best I keep it skimmy as opposed to detailed. There's a need for and a time for change. It's an uncomfortable topic. It's a tricky one to even articulate. I've been asked a few times this week by those in the know, what am I going to say? How am I going to broach it? What not to say, what to steer clear of. It's complicated, but let's just take any personal aspects, personalization risks out of it, and say that we've had 3 CEOs in the last 4 years, 5 certainly, 4 I think. It hasn't worked, and it's been costly. I don't mean that necessarily financially, but I mean it more at a resource level, at a personnel level, office side, and council side, and that's not right. It's not fair on all concerned, and there is a need to reconfigure that. So I am very proud to be part of a team, to be chairing a governance reform working group along with Ian O'Grady, who's, I know, Ian's not renowned for or known for his agreeableness levels. I think he'd be okay with me saying that. But he has a deep heart, which is very much anchored in conviction, integrity, and values. And I think anyone who knows Ian or might know of him would have seen that at the 2009 conference with Vicky Phelan as keynote speaker, and Catherine Corliss, who was the other keynote speaker, speaking to some of his own personal journey and issues, but also timeless contributors to societal matters, and who ultimately have been proven correct in the round. And I think Ian is to be credited for that. He's part of the Reform Group Working Committee, as is Cal, as is Sarah, as is John Francis, and myself. And that includes putting the acquisition of a property back on the strategic plan and on the agenda. It's time. We are determined to make that happen in the next 12 months. I know I'll be back here in 12 months' time going, so the reason it didn't happen, but I hope I'm not, because it's very, very important. And it's not just important for PSI and its identity and for it to mitigate some charity regulator surplus kind of policy, blah, blah, blah. It's because we've always wanted a home. The Carolyn Trust was something was bequeathed to us for that purpose. We specifically designated it for that purpose. It needs to be prioritized. And not just because of us having a headquarters and an asset and a property, but a base, a home, future-proofing our direction. And for me, it is the conduit. It is the platform that enables me to meet with, talk to, establish rapport with, and understand staff, their concerns, their insights, their perspectives, as well as our own. So without that, I've noticed a major deficit in that regard, and I think that has been a contributor to some of the challenges, difficulties that have arisen in recent times. I think council needs to wake up as well. I won't be liked for saying that. I'm conscious of some BPS colleagues in the room, and there's possibly APA colleagues in the room too. I'm not overly familiar with all of the comparing models and their differences and similarities, but BPS, I think, has about 150,000 members, by the way. I think we've just passed 5,000. We've never been bigger. There are more than 500 delegates at this conference. There have never been that number of delegates at a conference before, to my knowledge. But BPS's national board is about half the size of ours. It's also, I think, comprised of half psychologists, half skills-based experts who are outside of psychology. We need to grapple with these issues, is my opinion. And I know I'm not alone in saying that, but I also know that not everyone will agree with that. But using the platform, I genuinely and very strongly feel this needs to be put on the agenda and the discussion that we need to be having internally, but also across different formats over the coming year and years beyond. I think, why do we have a specified term for president as 1 year? No other officer roles are defined, but they're implicitly kind of, implicated to be a year. BPS is 2 years. I think in Northern Ireland is 3 years. I think Geraldine told me earlier. We're already pouring ourselves into constitutional amendments, and I'm very grateful to Sarah, Ian, Hal, and who am I missing? I'm missing someone I know, or me, I'm missing me, at identifying areas of improvement. There are many, many areas of potential improvement, and we're identifying them continuously and trying to address them. And it was very reassuring to see, our membership at AGM ratify our proposed amendments, which weren't necessarily ratified previously, despite attempts to do so. So there's momentum there, and I think the board needs to be trained in how to be a board. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I know a little bit more now about what I'm supposed to do as a board member, but when I joined, I had no idea, clueless. And I think that's a recurring theme in people who are coming in. An induction packet and policy has certainly been introduced, but it's not enough. And training, whether it's board-specific training, and I think other discussions and workshops over the conference so far might suggest maybe other training too in terms of power dynamics, etc. Difficult, uncomfortable topics perhaps, but they need to be named. I don't know if, I won't go into this. Okay, there's two final things. I can't define, what's a disability placement? And maybe that's something that we can talk about later. If anyone actually knows, like it's vague. I think it's synonymous with intellectual disability, an area I've never worked in. I work in a hospital and I'm surrounded by disability. And I don't understand why physical disability in Enable Ireland or some other facility is approved, but hospitals are deemed specialist in terms of postgraduate training for some of our mainstreams. So I just think that merits discussion, but I'll leave it at that. I think Koru is something I probably have been avoiding to mention, but I'll finish up-ish on it. I am still trying to understand it. It's been 43 years since we first started to address it, solve it. It's taken 43 years to get to the point we're currently at. There are concerns that still hang in the ether and remain, and PSI are very much committed to highlighting those concerns, articulating them, relaying them, and seeking some resolution of them. Mitchell has been incredible over the years at this issue, and I would be hopeful of his willingness to be co-opted back on during a year where this is a really important issue to address. But sorry, that's a bit pressurizing. I didn't mean to doorstop you there, or did I? But Koru, yeah, it's fantastic. There are three clear sort of streams and divisions that seem to be straightforward-ish. Grandparenting will kind of take care of some of the rest of the issues. The fourth division, the fourth issue, I'm very, very concerned that our academic colleagues are being kind of marginalized or sidelined and left out. And I just don't, that's unconscionable for me. It's the academic colleagues and partners that we rely on for training, for educating us, for assisting and collaborating. They're part of our ecosystem. They're certainly part of our societal community. I can't countenance personally a solution that would omit them from the Koru solution. So I think I think council members, many of them, and colleagues are committed to keeping that part of the conversation. Okay, time to wrap it up. I know, sorry, Niall, I can only, whatever, we'll talk later. Okay, how do I wrap this up? I'll do it very quickly. We're a very special community. We're a very broad church. I've always felt at home with PSI. I do like the social side of it more than the, this professional workshop attending side of it. But we have an interesting history, and it's a very interesting time in our history. And we have a huge amount of amazing, incredible, inspiring energy to leverage as we go forward and as we work it out across a variety of different topics and issues. And I, as much as I curse myself for getting involved, thanks Oren for the invitation, I also remain here because of how much it matters. Anyway, okay. So as a membership society, I think that's the point. We are here for each other, and I don't believe in pulling ladders up after oneself. I like the outlier life that I've lived. I embrace it. I wear it like a badge now. I felt a little ashamed and embarrassed and marginalized previously. I know others in this room will feel similarly for different reasons. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of who we are, what's most important, and how we can remain connected in the most meaningful way. Thank you.